You're listening to the Bitcoin Lawyer Podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Bitcoin Lawyer Podcast, your legal bridge between Bitcoin and freedom. Today, I am joined by former Prime Minister Joseph Muscat, former Prime Minister of Malta. He was Prime Minister from 2013 to 2020. Sir, if you could just give us a brief introduction of yourself and just a little bit about you personally.
So, hi Adam, hi everyone. I'm Joseph. I'm 51 years old. I've been Prime Minister of my country for around 7 years. My background is in economics and management research. I hold a PhD from Bristol University, was a member of the European Parliament, then became leader of the opposition and later prime minister in my country, married and a father of two beautiful twin girls at Valentine's.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate that. I wanted to dive in. So just for quick background for listeners and yourself, people who haven't heard our previous episodes, on this podcast, we basically talk about the crossroads of Bitcoin, citizenship by investment, and the law concerning all of those topics, okay? So I wanted to dive in and talk to you today about the Individual Investor Program, Malta's first citizenship by investment program that started at the beginning of your administration. So I was wondering if you could just give us a little bit of the background of how that program started and then how it was initially implemented.
Look, I don't believe that the common idea that CBIs are a thing of present or an invention, very recent invention, is true. They have been around for many, many years, much more than people might dare to think. In the Roman Empire, people who would be part of the empire but are not Roman citizens by birth would be given the opportunity to contribute to the empire financially and being granted citizenship. It goes back so much. So what we have done is basically see best practice worldwide and tailor-make a program that fits our purposes. So contrary to maybe other countries in other parts of the world, namely the Caribbean, where these programs are extremely popular, our necessity was not financial, really and truly. So Malta's economy has and can do quite handsomely even without a citizenship by investment program. It has always been very diversified with financial services, with manufacturing industry, so
tourism.
on and so forth. Exactly, tourism, hospitality, so on and so forth. So what we were really after was talent and networks, being able to access networks, because as you well know, the most precious resource and the scarcest resource that people in the top 1% have is not money, it's time. And for a small country to compete with the big guns for attention, to just get at the table of these individuals, it's extremely difficult. This type of program provided us with the opportunity, with the exceptional opportunity to access a network where we could make ourselves known to extremely influential individuals, very big entrepreneurs around the world, some of whom would end up at the end of the day investing in our country, and that the type of investment, and it's not only an economic investment, it's also the type of investment where they would feel part of the country, which is really and truly invaluable. So it's very difficult to put a price tag to it. So that what we were really after, and that is what I think we managed to achieve.
Definitely agree with you in terms of attracting human capital to the island, not just financial capital. I'm not sure if I told you, but I actually went to law school at University of Malta, finished my LLM just last year. And the reason why I wanted to go to law school there was because that Malta is the only EU country with a current CBI program. And I actually wrote my legal thesis on Malta's case with the European Commission. I actually submitted that in September, and then it was in October when the Advocate General Collins actually issued his recommendation that, the EC basically stand down and allow Malta to continue administering the program as is.
Let's see if that stands. Let's see.
Sure.
I think there is a lot of pressure going on politically, because what the Advocate General has suggested is pure common sense, and not only legally but also politically. But I think it has made many people unhappy in Brussels. So I do hope that the recommendation stands the test when it comes to the final judgment, I believe, in the next 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, and not to get too into the legal side, but one of the arguments that I used in my thesis was that Austria has an unofficial citizenship by investment program that isn't really talked about, but, at a level of 5 to 10 million euros, you can essentially, on a case-by-case basis, make a pitch to the country, to the government, that, I want to come in and build a clothing factory, something akin to that. And I'm going to hire this many people, invest, this amount of euros. And if it kind of fits in with the government's plans, no problem. And that's completely acceptable under the Citizenship Act under Austria. But, they're not really under fire, or at least under political pressure, the way that Brussels has applied it to Malta, because it's not an outright. To me, Malta has always been like this program, be it the residency by investment or the citizenship by investment. It's a purely egalitarian system. It's a financial transaction, and that's it. Here are the requirements. Here's who can apply. Here's who can't, based on the standards. If you meet it, great. If you don't, no problem. Sorry.
Look, I agree with basically everything you said. The point in all this is that, what Malta did that probably irked some people is that we were too transparent, maybe. Many countries would offer such programs based on, I wouldn't say many countries, some countries would base such programs on really and truly connections, on loopholes in systems, on even, legal instruments that are there, but are there for the very few or according to the networks you belong to. In our case, we just were very open in saying, this is what you need to satisfy. This is not state secret. This is how you do it.
Absolutely.
And
yeah.
These are the tests you need to go through. And at the end of the day, it's quite strange, in my opinion, that the Commission has gone through such a, spent so many millions of EU taxpayers' money in trying to fight a concept which, especially on the point of, say, it's a threat to security. Come on. These people, these ladies and gentlemen who qualify for this program probably undergo one of the toughest due diligence processes in the world. And definitely they are no more of a security threat than anyone who might want to come to the European Union and marry a gentleman or a lady, and then in most EU countries qualify for citizenship within a couple of years. I'm not aware that we do due diligence, and God forbid we do due diligence on who marries who. So
Right.
Especially on the point of security threat, it irritates me a lot. It's definitely not the case.
I would wonder if any of the justices or any of the prosecutors have actually ever even looked at the application for the Malta citizenship by investment and are aware of the continuing due diligence after the passport is actually given to the applicants.
No. I wouldn't know that, but I'm pretty sure. So in my office, I had some of the wealthiest people in the world complaining to me that they hadn't passed the test. And I would tell them it's not about how much money you have, it's whether you pass the test or not, and no politician will get involved in this. I'm sorry if you didn't. And in the same manner, I'm quite sure that other European citizens or people who are citizens of by birth of other European countries, wouldn't qualify to become a citizen through our program because simply they wouldn't fit. They wouldn't meet the criteria. So that is really one. You can argue on other legal points. You can argue on other political points. You cannot argue on the point of security because really and truly it's the toughest test that you can withstand.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually was having a conversation with a colleague the other day. She's a practitioner based in Dubai, and she made the point that citizenship by investment is not selling passports. It's not for everyone. Like, it's not a commodity that's for sale. For example, if you want to purchase a new bed, you go to a furniture store, you purchase the bed, there's a financial transaction, done and done. But with the citizenship by investment programs, it's for people who are fortunate enough to have the financial ability to afford the program and can pass the due diligence requirements. So I completely agree with the point that you're making, that it's not just about people who do have the financial means to pay for the program, but it's about the people that also can pass the normal 4-tier due diligence.
Look, apart from this program, we also have a program for people based on merit, on, say, contribution to sport, to academia, to arts, like many other countries do. So if you look at it conceptually, on one side, and these programs never afford any controversy from politicians or from the commission. But if you look at it conceptually, when it comes to citizenship by investment, person is contributing financially and needs to withstand a very tough due diligence. When it comes to, say, sport or art, a person is contributing through his or her talents exclusively, and probably no due diligence is done on any football player or any gymnast or any violinist at the end of the day, because one wouldn't be known as being very good at doing any particular thing. And if you look at probably most national teams in Europe when it comes to football, you would be able to trace at least one or two players who have been naturalized because of their talent. And I'm not saying this in a critical manner, but it's the same concept at the end of the day. It's just a matter of what the contribution is that is different, but the concept is the same.
Yeah, it's not, I wouldn't say it's just Malta or even Europe. I remember, what was it? When were the last Olympics? And I remember looking and reading something that something like more than 50% of the athletes that were competing for Qatar were all foreign nationals who had been naturalized. So essentially the government had gone out, recruited the best athletes they could, made them citizens so that they could compete for them on their Olympic team. So, I mean, there's completely precedent for that.
Definitely.
Just to touch on that point. I wanted to move on to another topic, if we could. So just to touch on politics a little bit, I know you mentioned that before becoming Prime Minister, you had served as a member of the European Parliament. I just wanted to touch on politics a little bit. I wanted to know if you could talk about, during your tenure as a member of the European Parliament, what were some things that you saw there that made you want to come back to Malta and run for Prime Minister? I'm just wondering, what was sort of the, I guess, maybe political situation in the country, and what were some of the things that you ran on during that election cycle?
So let me say that my experience in the European Parliament was very positive. As in, I come from a very politically polarized country. It's black and white, red and blue. It's either one or the other. There's very little middle ground. And in the European Parliament, I did manage to understand and work better in a situation of building coalitions, of building trust across the aisle. And I love that. And really and truly, I can label my years in the European Parliament as very formative years in understanding not only how Europe works, but in understanding better, the frame of mind of people with whom you share very little. And it opened my mind also to, I was very young at the time, so I was 29. So at that age, I think you think in very absolutist terms, that you're right, the others are wrong, how stupid they must be. And then you get wiser. And then you start to understand that, look, even though we might at the end of the day disagree, there are quite some valid points in what they're saying. And you start fine-tuning and you end up most of the time in the center ground of politics. And that's what really happened to me. So I was always, say, economically inclined to understand or to be more friendly than your average social democrat to market economy dynamics. And yes, my term in the European Parliament left me convinced that, in order to be an effective politician, at least in my book, you need to be economically on the right and socially on the left, and not the other way around, God forbid. So then things at home happened in a way that in 2008 there was an election that the Labour Party was slated to win but did not win. For a number of reasons, I was asked to run for leader of the party, and I said, I say so many crazy things that hopefully they will let me be. I can continue with my work in the European Parliament. Instead, they elected me, and then 4 years after or so, I became Prime Minister of the country.
That's quite an accomplishment, sir. Okay. I just wanted to maybe talk a little bit about some of the policies that were enacted while you were Prime Minister. I think when we look at citizenship by investment as an industry, Malta is pretty much held up as the creme de la creme. It's held up as it has the highest standards. It's the only CBI program that has visa-free access to the United States, but it's the one that actually has the most visa-free access and provides the best quality of life. So I wanted to just ask, what were some of the initial social or national policies, aside from the CBI program, that your administration implemented while you were Prime Minister?
I believe that Malta has a very good name internationally. It's a country that I think it's a good country. I don't know whether you're familiar with the Good Country Index. So it's classified as a good country, the same way that, say Ireland is classified as a good country, Canada is classified as a good country. It's a country that at the end of the day makes you feel good. So it has something in it that you would say, I would really consider being part of that community.
That's exactly what I was going to say, was that the time that I lived there, it felt very much like a community, just because the population size is so small that it does feel like it's a very safe country. Like, at no time did I ever feel unsafe, or like there were areas where I couldn't go, but definitely there's a sense of community resoundingly throughout the country, I would say.
I think that's also normal in small islands, that you get that sense of community. In our case, I think we have a tendency to badmouth ourselves a lot, in the sense that we try to find our own shortcomings, but when push comes to shove, we know that it is a good place to live. It's a safe place where to raise kids. Obviously, so that brings me to what the changes were that we implemented. You cannot treat such a place as the set of the Truman Show. It's not something that you treat like some sort of Springville, America set where everything is perfect and everyone will say hi to the neighbor, that sort of thing. And sometimes when people think of how to keep a community safe and how to keep a community prosperous, they think in those terms. And so some sort of isolating an island that is already isolated in itself. We did quite the opposite, because the times when Malta thrived were the times where it embraced its global mission, be it in the war, serving as a place as a bastion and as a point of refuge for the Allied forces. It's during the Crusades when it served as a hospital for Christians and Muslims alike. Being during the ages of peace when it served as a mercantile port. It has always been very open to adopt more liberal policies, both economically we're always quite liberal, but say socially when it comes to same-sex marriage, when it comes to anything that has to do with the concept that you are the master of your own life and the state should not intrude in your own personal choices. So we moved a lot on that agenda during the first part of the second decade of this millennium. And that's what we tried to do.
Malta to me always seemed like what you mentioned, a crossroads of so many different cultures from North Africa, from the East, and then, Romans, and then the French, and then the British.
Yeah, basically everyone except the Germans, we like to say.
Well, yeah, because Germans were never good at naval operations.
No, but then the irony is that the biggest investments on industrialization that came to Malta after our independence came from Germany. So
really, okay.
Yes. So the Germans did not manage to convince us with the bombs, but they convinced us with the technology. So over here, some of the best, FDI that we have, and the first FDI was German. Because I'll go back to the Truman Show analogy.
Yeah, sure.
Very few people think of Malta in the sense that, I don't know whether you know what our biggest single export is.
Is it the offshore gaming?
No. Okay. Our single biggest, and most of the Maltese wouldn't know how to answer that. Our single biggest export are microchips. So probably in your laptop, in your mobile phone, in your car, you'll probably have a microchip made in Malta. And the semiconductor industry is not something you would associate immediately to our country, which shows that we always defied logic in many ways, and that this program, when it comes to citizenship by investment, is not something new for us conceptually, but it is really and truly a reaffirmation of our inner nature.
Do you mean that it's maybe more of a vocal expression of your sovereignty, something akin to that?
Yeah, I would say that.
I don't know. I don't know if that's what you're trying to allude to.
Yes. I definitely do. So I believe that our country, the best way of defining ourselves, or at least I would try to define ourselves, even if some people take offense at this definition, is that we are corsairs. So the difference between pirates and the corsair is that pirates do things illegally. Corsairs have a license to do things that are on the brink of what is acceptable by the mainstream. And in many ways, we have always done that, being a mercantile nation. We have done that politically over time, say, by being one of the very first countries that recognized China, one of the very first countries to have relations with Palestinian people, while at the same time having excellent relations with the Israelis. And we did this program, I think, can be best interpreted in this spirit.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, when you're a small country, for example, I come from the United States, right? If I had to describe the United States, I would say it's a country that is currently coasting off its former victories, is that it's a country that has in the past achieved many things, provided a lot of good in the world, but I don't necessarily know if it has the political will to continue to do that? And I mean, not to get too much into politics here, but I mean, to me, I really see, if we look at the rise of China, I think China wants to be the world superpower more than the US does. And that's really what the question in the next perhaps 10 years, maybe a couple of decades is going to be, is the US going to step up and continue to lead in the way that it previously had when it was thinking about the global welfare of everyone, rather than just being a country focused on isolationism and, domestic problems, rather than thinking about how its reach is global. I mean, American culture is global, so it's not just from an economic standpoint, it's from a cultural standpoint as well.
I think that no American government can give up the US's natural supremacy on world culture, really and truly. So it takes more than a president or a government to renounce to that. What I think will happen, and at least in my books, it's not a bad thing, even though it might not be, it's not being done for maybe the right reasons, is that the US's own redimensioning of its own role does make Europe and other players, think India, think of Brazil, think of China, as we said, then think also of Saudi.
So you're talking about BRICS countries.
Yeah, the BRICS, but not only BRICS, other countries take an important role in saying, this is a time in our life where there will not be Uncle Sam looking after us all, but we need to look after ourselves collectively. So my point is not an isolationist or nationalistic point that everyone to his own and let's not interfere into each other's affairs, but rather it's not one country that needs to do everything for everyone, but everyone needs to do everything. I don't know whether you get me on that.
I think essentially you're saying that the U.S. does not need to be the world police. The U.S. can be a support tool to many countries, can be a friend to many countries in various ways, economic, militarily, things like that. You don't want one country to sort of be the world police and, go around and flex its political or economic muscles just to serve its own purpose, if I'm understanding you.
I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of any type of hegemony.
Right, okay.
And I believe that every country, or not every country, every culture has its you need to view it according to the history of that country and to the experience of that. So there are some absolute values, but the way in which they are implemented and how they are implemented and the speed at which they are implemented really depends on many things. I'll give you an example which has to do with equal rights.
Please do.
For people, for the LGBTIQ community. So I am a great advocate of the community. I have introduced with my government some of the most advanced legislation where we are now number one worldwide in the Rainbow Index. So we are the most friendly LGBTIQ country legislation-wise and all the rest in the world. But I do understand when I speak to, say, African colleagues with whom I used to lobby and I still lobby for, at least the criminalization of homosexuality. And they tell me quite candidly, some of them, Joe, we have been a colony only until a few years ago. The British introduced the criminalization of homosexuality. They've taken so many hundreds of years to put in this law, other hundreds of years to get rid of this law, and now you want us to do just everything all at once, which is not a good excuse in my opinion, but I understand the argument. And it's about engagement. It's about not blacklisting people. It's not about saying, these are the bad guys. We shouldn't have a conversation with them. No, it's about going into a situation where there might be baby steps followed by giant steps, which you can come into. You can make them only if you engage and not if you disengage.
So I actually kind of want to dig into not this topic specifically, but social issues in Malta, because this was something that I was always a little confused about during my time there. All right. So as a foreigner, Malta, very socially Catholic country, right? I mean, Catholic churches everywhere. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's insane, not insane, but you understand what I mean, right?
Yeah, you can say insane. It's not. We won't take offense of that.
Okay.
You can say insane.
I was trying to be respectful. The amount of churches and the role that the church has in society there. But then to find out that Malta is so LGBTIQ IA friendly, but still doesn't have legal abortion. So how do you necessarily juxtapose those two social issues that are normally on the same side?
Look, I believe that you need to look at our history over the past 150 years to start understanding our frame of mind. And I'm not too sure that we understand it ourselves. But back in the 60s, an extremely progressive government, or the Labour Party, was elected to government for a very short stint, 2 years, on a manifesto that was, putting forward ideas such as freedom of worship, freedom of speech, so on and so forth. Things that managed to unite against it the Church of England-led British government at the time and the Roman Catholic Church of Malta, because both of them didn't really like it. That resulted in a decade where the Maltese Church basically declared that whoever would vote for the Labour Party would basically go to hell.
Are we talking, were they like excommunicating members, that kind of?
Yes, excommunicating people, burying people who were labor activists in non-consecrated cemeteries. A big deal for a Roman Catholic country. And still, the Labour Party managed to get a very handsome part of the vote. And 1 decade after, when the peace was made between the two sides, one way or another, the Labour Party came into government and stayed there for 16 years, and it implemented some very radical changes, be it, lowering of voting age, the decriminalization of adultery, the formal separation between church and state, those sort of things. And so what for us is common sense, But I believe I'm one of those who think that the swinging of the pendulum between one part and the other took so much toll on Maltese families, because there were families who would be literally separated and torn apart by politics, that after this happened, there were decades of lull, where people wouldn't want to say or do anything that has to do with social.
So it basically was trying to just not rock the boat socially.
Yeah,
just kind of
a sort of detente. Which then, my generation, which was not part of that generation, would not associate oneself to. And with it, so many changes that were obvious. And this generation, it's just a matter of time. I think there is a clear realization that the issues related to women's rights and, pro-choice and pro-life will be decided in the next couple of years, and at the end of the day, it's a debate that everyone knows that will happen. I need to say also that the role of the church in Malta has been increasingly more nuanced in approach.
I think that happens in any democracy. Like over time, even when there's an official religion of the state, that slowly their sphere of influence diminishes.
In our case, I don't. Well, it can be that the church's influence has diminished. In my opinion, it has morphed rather than diminished. So the church has become wiser in its approach. So I don't expect the Roman Catholic Church to become pro-choice. I don't expect, I simply think they're doing their job. Those are the rules of the club. But at the end of the day, I do expect the Maltese political and civil society establishments to take the lead very soon in a nationwide discussion on what is a very clear gap in our system.
No, that's very interesting. I just wanted to get your input on that because it's not every day that I get to speak with a prime minister and ask those kind of political questions. So it's just very interesting and very insightful to hear that from a politician who's actually willing to actually speak on the topic, because some of them will just shy away. They won't say anything, they won't get close to a microphone, that kind of thing, for fear of potential retribution or,
but
because
until 10 years, until 15 years ago, anyone who uttered the word divorce would get the same thing. It was that bad. It was that bad. And at the end of the day, when we put it on the agenda, it was like, the emperor's new clothes. At the end of the day, just got a small kid saying, well, he's naked. And everyone say, oh, yes, he's naked. So, and that is what happened.
Oh, right, sir. I just wanted to, as I mentioned, be respectful of time. So I just have two other topics that I wanted to discuss before we close out. If we could, I'd like to just to circle back to the original IIP program. And then I wanted to ask, if you were to look at the changes, rather than just like the requirements that were under the original individual investor program, when they moved into the NEIN, I believe that program came into effect after you left office in 2021.
Yes.
Correct.
It was basically a tweak of the original program.
Okay. But I'm assuming a lot of that groundwork for those changes happened during your administration. So I'm just wondering if you could maybe speak to what were some of the reasons for that retooling of the program.
So I believe that the main difference is, apart from the entry level, the price entry level, we were always very careful that we wouldn't want to price ourselves too high in a way that then we would need to reduce the price, as that would be, I think, disastrous for any product, let alone an important concept such as citizenship. It came really from the experience of what people value most. So is it, say, time? Are you ready to invest more if there is an option to have a fast track? So on and so forth. So I think any successful program needs to change over time. You can have a program that is out there forever. Also because market conditions change. So now we will have a situation where the US has its own program. Will it be successful or not?
That remains to be seen. That's a
a
whole other conversation.
It's obviously there is a huge tax component with FATCA on all that, but that's only one of the issues. But the point is that I think there's a more important point than FATCA, which makes it extremely important for the US to have entered this market for the whole industry. And that is the fact that many countries were being threatened, or at least the banks in many countries were being threatened to being cut off from the system for servicing the industry, from being cut off from the US dollar system, from correspondent banking services system.
That was a complete bully tactic by the US Treasury. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I mean, with the US dollar being the world reserve currency, the US was able to basically go around the world, threaten banks, look, if you don't give us, screw your country's privacy laws, your banking requirements, give us information on citizens or permanent residents from the United States, or you won't get access to dollars. That's a complete bully.
It is what it is. My point is that, well, apart from the fact that I believe that the biggest or the most lethal weapon that the US has is not the nuclear bomb, it's the US dollar. I think it's more lethal because it's a death by 1,000 cuts and not
That's very true.
by pressing one button. But now you have basically the owner of the US dollar part of the system and putting forward the most expensive probably program and the whole system and legitimizing the whole concept. So that means that at least when it comes to the argument for cutting out from the system banks from smaller countries or banks who service the industry, it's gone. So, okay, they can still find other excuses, but the reason for which it was done until now is totally gone. Totally gone. So my point is that the industry changes. No one was thinking until a few months back that the US would enter the industry. With the US enter the industry needs to recalibrate, whether it's for the good or for the bad. I think it's for the good.
I think it remains yet to be seen on the actual legal basis for how that's established. The issue is that it still actually takes an act of Congress to put together that sort of immigration category, and it would require a rewriting of tax law because under the original presentation, they said that people coming in under this Trump Gold Card would be exempt from taxes. And, as a U.S. citizen, if I move abroad or if I live outside of the United States, I still am obligated to file and pay taxes. So I don't understand how you're going to essentially create another category when, from a legal standpoint, there is no distinction between this type of individual as an immigrant and citizens and permanent residents. So from a legal standpoint, I definitely think there's a little bit of an uphill battle to establish that from a legislative angle, but we'll see what happens.
I get you. My point again would be that the fact that the president of the United States wants to enter the industry, whether the US does or not, it's a huge plus for the industry. It's a legitimization of the industry. It's in the same category of the decisions that president has taken when it comes to the Bitcoin reserve. So it does give a lot of impetus. So it could be negative shocks at the end of the day, but it makes this... So let's put it this way. I think that the prohibition era is gone. Okay, and now everyone will try to rush in this industry in one way or another.
I agree. There are at least rumors at this point that I know of possibly 2 countries that are launching CBI programs later this year, whether or not they actually cleared the legislative hurdle to be implemented that way. But there are other countries, both of them island countries, that are possibly going to be entering the CBI industry. And as we saw with Nauru in the South Pacific starting their program last November, that's, another option. I just wanted to close out with one last question, if I could. So, we've talked about the role of politics in Malta, the creation of the IPP, which then became the NEIN, and going forward with the case against the European Commission. I just wanted to ask, what role do you see cryptocurrency playing in Malta and how that possibly might relate to its citizenship by investment program or residency by investment program?
I believe that digital currencies are the present and the future. Any ideas of, trying to shut them out makes us look like the follower of Mr. Ludd, whose claim to fame in history is of leading a group of workers during the Industrial Revolution, going into factories and smashing machinery because the machinery was taking the place of people. So it's about regulating. It's about making a difference and a clear difference whether this is a financial instrument or not, so that the adequate regulation is in place, making the consumers aware of how it's different from what they would normally categorize as investments, and that they wouldn't categorize as the investment in the classical way. I would definitely not close the door to the, joining the two sides. There is at least one country, El Salvador, that actually joins the dots between.
If I can interject real quick on that issue, the issue that El Salvador sort of has is El Salvador and Malta in this aspect actually both use a currency that is not native to their own, right? Like El Salvador is on the US dollar. It's been there since 1980s, which they adopted post-Civil War. And then Malta is on the euro, as was a condition for it ascending and becoming an EU country in 2004. My question would be, is Malta too beholden to the ECB to potentially implement the use or acceptance of cryptocurrency in everyday transactions in the country?
Look, first of all, the ECB rules are very clear. My point is not at going in defiance of these ECB rules. It's about making yourself available to be the testing bed of new policies that will definitely need to be taken into consideration, whether it's Bitcoin or the digital euro. So that is where I see our country going, and that is why we had regulated, we were one of the first to regulate on blockchain, so the technology itself. So at the end of the day, it's about keeping up the pace. I think we were one of the first entrants. I wouldn't say trailblazers, but definitely one of the first entrants. I wouldn't want us to lose traction, but to keep our courser spirit in daring to go to the edge of the world when people think that the earth is flat, and then discovering that it's, at the end of the day, it's round.
Sure. And I think, holding your guns or sticking to your guns against the European Commission and your previous legal victories is a prime example of the ethos of Malta and basically maintaining that from a legal standpoint, you have every right to do that. Political opinions can be there, but at the end of the day, you have the legal right to do it. So I definitely can understand your point in that. I just wanted to ask, did you have any closing remarks that you'd like to share, Prime Minister?
Just as that I really enjoyed the conversation, and I hope that your listeners enjoyed it.
All right. Really want to thank you very, very much, Prime Minister. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you making yourself available for this time to speak with me about the role of Malta's citizenship by investment, a little bit of political talk within the country, and then, the financial aspects as it relates to the ECB as well. Just want to say thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, sir.
Thanks for listening to the Bitcoin Lawyer Podcast. For more information, please visit our website at www.bitcoinlawyer.com. And remember, Bitcoin Lawyer is your legal bridge between Bitcoin and freedom.